All right. And next, after that, he has a figure here that illustrates this process of stepping down from d equals 1 to d equals 0 with these fancy little illustrations right here. So here d equals 1, fully centralized, all blocks produced by the core nodes, to d equals 0, all blocks produced by pools, stake pools, core nodes switched off. Okay, so and then rewards earned by pools, standard performance penalties, voting enabled on protocol parameters. So there's a little bit more that needs to be explained there. And then there's these different stages along the way. So here d is greater than 0.8 but less than 0.1. And then there'll be another sort of interval where d is greater than 0.5, 50% production, less than 0.8, and then there'll be one last step where d is between 0.5 and 0. So what's going on with this little illustration? Well, these blue nodes I would suspect represent the Byron era nodes because there's none of them here at d equals 0. All right, and these red little filled in dots represent the stake pools. So this sort of illustrates the change from the Byron era nodes, the blue filled in dots, to the Shelley era stake pools, the red filled in dots. And so what are these little white nodes? Well, these are either the relays or these are the dataless wallets that are passively interacting with the blockchain by keeping a record of the blockchain in a different location. So I think that's what these hollowed out ones, because they still exist over here at d equals 0, and so they're also still participating in it. So I think that's the meaning, of this a little bit cryptic illustration, which really isn't described. I don't see any legend here that describes what those are supposed to mean, but I think that's pretty apparent from the description that they have down here. So they've got these key milestones, all right, as he's calling it here, of the D journey. So let's look through that. D less than 1, move away from centralization. So the first milestone happened on August 13th. Well, today that I'm recording this, it's August the 17th. So the epochs are 5 days long, remember. This was at the boundary of epoch 210 and 211. We're in epoch 211, and we've got about one more day to go in that epoch when the D parameter first dropped below 1. It's currently at 0.9. At this point, IOG's core nodes started to share the block production of blocks with community stake pools. This marks the beginning of the road to full decentralization. Now, eventually, we'll get down to D equals 0.8. Now, as it turns out, and we'll see later on in the article, we're just a day away at this moment here on August the 17th, 2020, from being at d equals 0.8. So the first epoch boundary back on August the 13th, between 210 and 211, we stepped from d equals 1 to d equals 0.9. Now, at the next one, the boundary of 211 and 212, which is coming up tomorrow, August the 18th, what's going to happen is d is going to decrement further, and it will be d equals 0.8. So now stake pools produce 20% of the blocks. So as he writes, at 0.8, more pools, double the number compared to d equals 0.9, will get the opportunity to create blocks and establish themselves. At this level, pools won't suffer in the rankings as long as they create one of the allocated blocks and get rewards. This way, we believe we can start growing the block minting proportion of the network at low network risk. Okay, what is he saying there? So if you recall from the dataless videos that I made, specifically the 2 videos about how to stake with the dataless wallet, I showed you in the delegation center of the dataless wallet, there is a list of the stake pools, and they are ranked. They're given a ranking in that delegation center of dataless. That ranking is supposed to tell you how desirable a particular pool is for staking with. But I also said at the current moment, the ranking is not working. Okay, so I said very clearly in that video, do not use the ranking in Daedalus because they are randomly ranked at the moment. So what this is saying here is that all the way from D equals 1 to D equals 0.8, they're not going to enforce any kind of performance penalty in the rankings of the pools. Okay, and certainly right now the rankings are completely random. But eventually that will turn on. Okay, that ranking mechanism is supposed to be a tool to help you make your staking decision. We're just early on in the process. They are eventually going to turn that on. But in this time period where the stake pools are only producing a small amount of blocks, if you have a small pool and it's only scheduled to get one block, it only has a chance to produce one block, and for whatever reason it doesn't make that, then the penalty imposed by that ranking mechanism could be devastating to that pool. So they're just saying, we're not going to impose any penalties for missing blocks. So as long as you mint at least one block, you get your full rewards down till you get to D equals 0.8. Once you go below D equals 0.8, I think things are going to change. And that's what the next section is talking about. So D is less than 0.8. Now stake performance taken into account. The next major milestone will happen when D drops below 0.8. Below that level, each pool's performance will be taken into account when determining the rewards that it receives. Above that level, however, the pool's performance is ignored. The reason for this is to avoid unfairness to pools when they're only expected to produce the full blocks. Okay, so that confirms what I was just saying. Now, don't be fooled into thinking that D is going to march down to 0 very quickly and that each epoch they're going to drop it down by 0.1. No, that's not the case. So they're going quickly down to D equals 0.8, again, to give as many pools as possible an opportunity to produce a block and get established on the blockchain. After they get to 0.8, then things are going to slow down. And I believe, I think this article later confirms that it's going to start decrementing at a rate of 0.02. So the next step after D equals 0.8 should be D equals 0.78, okay? D equals 0.78. So things will become 5 times slower than they were before. All right, so now the next milestone is D less than 0.5. When D drops below 0.5, stake pools will produce the majority of blocks. The network will have reached a tipping point where decentralization is inevitable. Before taking this dramatic step, we will ensure that 2 critical features are in place: peer-to-peer pool discovery and protocol changes to enable community voting. Okay, so this goes back to the top of the article where I was talking about the 3 pillars of decentralization, where Kevin defined what decentralization means to Cardano. So there's this networking element, and we discussed that this peer-to-peer aspect of the blockchain and the Cardano node that the stake pools run does not have this ability for peer discovery, and they're working on producing that. And I said also there's currently no tool for governance, and you have to have that governance to bring all of these disparate and diverse entities that are running the stake pools together in order to make decisions. So we can drop back down here to where we were. And so it says, of course, we need to have some sort of tool for governance, and we need to have this peer-to-peer pool discovery working. These will enable us to make the final push to full and true decentralization. The recently announced Project Catalyst program was the first step in this concurrent journey to full on-chain governance. So they have this Project Catalyst program where I think they're looking to fund people to work on some projects to expand some of these options and some of these needed tools for the blockchain. So what's going to happen here, as I said, it's going to start stepping slowly. It'll be like 0.78, then 0.76, 0.74 until we get down to 0.5, and it's going to stop at 0.5. And who knows how long it's going to stop at 0.5. It's going to stay at 0.5 however long it takes until the peer-to-peer is working and there's a tool for governance. All right, it's not clear. I'm not sure anyone really even knows, to what level the governance needs to be enabled in order for them to feel confident to move further down with this D parameter. But, so there's a quick jump from D equals 1 to 0.8. Then it's going to slowly move down from 0.8 to 0.5. And then it's going to stop at 0.5 until, and it won't go beyond 0.5, at least according to the current plan, until they get these other options that aren't working yet built into the protocol. Once that happens, then they'll resume the rate of drop, and our next milestone will be D equals 0, and at that point, we should have achieved full decentralization. So as soon as the parameter reaches 0, the IOG core nodes will be permanently switched off. IOG will continue to run its own stake pools that will produce blocks in line with the stake they attract, just like any other pool. But these will no longer have any special role in maintaining the Cardano network. It will also, of course, delegate a substantial amount of its stake to community pools. Simultaneously, the voting mechanism will be enabled, and it will no longer be possible to increase D and re-centralize Cardano. So there's this question of, can D change direction? Could they start moving it up from, 0.5 back up to, 0.8 or whatever? So yes, obviously, as long as you have the code there that, is operating D, someone can go in and raise it up. I don't think that there's any intention. I don't think they have any intention of raising D. This is supposed to be a one-way journey with no, backtracking. So if they backtrack, that, meant that they moved forward before the blockchain was ready to accept that. And so if something bad happens, it might shoot back up to D equals 1, just until things stabilize and everything is recovered. Okay, but clearly here, the intention is that it's a one-way trip. It gets to D0 and that's it. And then I think the plan is to take the code for D out, so that once that's done, then it would be impossible to change it back. So you'd have to put that code for the D parameter back in, but the plan is to take it out and then leave it out. So at that point in time, we will have irrevocably entered a fully decentralized Cardano network plus block production. So, all three of the pillars of decentralization working together.